Welcome to Dynasty Life. I'm Theo Gremminger. Redraft leagues and best ball leagues come and go, but Dynasty is life. And my guest today, I'm really excited, because when I started out this show, this is like one of the people I really wanted to have on, not just because we're friends, but because I respect Jax Falcone, aka Scott Bullinger, of the Undrafted about as much as anybody in the Dynasty community. One of my favorite shows. I've had a chance to go on there. Really, really strong content. Jax and the rest of the Undroppables are really kind of bringing it. We have a great relationship with them at PlayerProfiler. And I'm thrilled to get a chance to have you on for this show because we're not only getting a chance to kind of relitigate this 2023 class of rookies, which has really, really, in my opinion, exceeded expectations. We're going to get a chance to kind of dive into a couple of these 2024 prospects we are both kind of into and go over a couple other topics that are kind of fresh on Dynasty Managers' minds. So we know it's playoff time for everybody, but we got to keep an eye on the future. This is a Dynasty podcast. And Jax, welcome to the show, man. You're crushing it. Why don't you tell everybody about the work you're putting out and where they can find you?
Thank you. Yeah. First of all, you gotta say Falcone. You are one of the only guys that says Falcone, which is fine. It's a fake name to begin with, so I guess you could say however you want.
So listen, I don't know if you've ever seen Batman Begins.
Yeah.
But there's Carmine Falcone, and he spells it the same as you do. So I guess it's.
I suppose you can say it however the hell you want. Because it's fake. I can't actually say no. This is how you pronounce it because I made it up. So.
And we're I live on Long Island. We're gonna say things how we see them. We're not concerned about the we're not concerned about the Shakespearean pronunciation of things.
You'll say it however the hell you damn well please.
Out in the Central Coast, you guys are keeping it like proper pronunciations, I'm sure, but. Here on Long Island, we're gonna say it how we feel it, and tell everybody about your show though, man, because I think it's just awesome. Every single week you're turning out fire. It's really good stuff.
Thank you. It's a lot of work, man. As you know, it sounds fun. Oh yeah, man, I'll start a podcast, and then all of a sudden, if people like it, it's even more, I don't know, I want to call it a burden, but you definitely want to deliver for people who care about the show and. It's been pretty cool actually because, a lot of great feedback from people. And so now the bar gets raised to try and make sure it's a good show every single week. So I really appreciate that. It's the Undrafted. And I try to make it the Dynasty People's Show. So that's what I try to do and try and make it the show I wished I had when I was starting Dynasty. So it's a lot of fun. You can find that wherever podcasts are found. We also have the Undroppables network feed, which we are, we have a ton of good shows on there and a lot of new shows coming out, which is really cool. So a lot of podcasts on the Undroppables feed. Obviously, you can find my show on the Player Profiler feed as well, which I'm proud to share with you guys. A lot of fun to do some content with and for you guys. So theundroppables.com is our website. And what else? You can follow me on Twitter where I rant into the sun. I don't know what I do on Twitter. I'm not exactly sure, but it's fun.
Your Twitter game is strong. No self-deprecation on that one. But big shout out again to the Undroppables. You got so many talented people. Love Chalk. Love Tommy Moe. You guys have formed like a really strong team over there, and it's really, really great content. But I want to kind of talk to you about a serious topic. Is my waiver wire edition in our shared Dynasty League that you are the commissioner of, my waiver wire edition of CJ Beathard, the ugliest one of the season in the league?
No. Okay. Someone had to have gotten Tim Boyle at some point. So
there you go.
Don't you think we should have spelled Boyle's name Boil?
It's just so funny. Like there's no organization in New York. It's such a mess. I see Joe Flacco this weekend. And Joe Flacco nearly passed for more yards than the Jets have all season in like his first game off the couch. The guy was literally on the couch a week ago. Now he's starting. And then like Tim Boyle, they throw him out there for the slaughter. He throws that ridiculous pick 6 on Black Friday to Miami. And then they cut him. He's out. You're out, Tim Boyle. In fact, we took a look at
that was the first smart move they made.
Yeah, he's awful. He's truly, truly awful. But we're going to stay away from the Jets quarterback discussion.
Yeah, please. Nobody wants to hear that.
Got to get to some impactful stuff. We've podcasted a million times before, but I think when we go back and kind of look at the season as a whole, one thing I really love asking my guests from a redraft perspective, is which player is your biggest positive surprise this season. And I think with redraft managers, it can help you win, for the season. But oftentimes for dynasty managers, a positive surprise can lead to, seasons and seasons of fantasy success. So, let's take Puka Nacua kind of out of the conversation, because he's that's your guy, and you deserve a lot of credit. Like you were flag planting Puka. And if anybody wants to know how real Scott gets with his takes, you were telling people that you could flex him week 1 of the season.
That's true.
So like you get your props for Puka. But every dynasty show in the world is talking about Puka Nacua. Give me another player that's been a huge positive surprise for you that's really kind of exceeded your expectations.
I don't know if it's a dynasty take, but Mike Evans has been great. And I'll tell you though, your Puka, I thank you for that, because it's interesting. I wasn't like Puka guy, in the draft. I sort of liked him. I was like, interesting. And I drafted him a few times, but I actually started to trade for him subsequently, because you started to see that the Rams liked him, and that he started to, I guess the point of Puka for me was a learning experience of not necessarily missing out because I wasn't reading the tea leaves as they came out throughout the spring. It's kind of like the QJ arrow down and Puka arrow up from the point of the NFL draft all the way till the first snap of football. And yeah, week 1, I was like, this Puka kid, I think he's going to get some opportunity. And if he gets opportunity and he happens to be good, that's when he can take off. So I was trying to get him on a lot of rosters preeminently before that started. And if you had him on a dynasty team, he kind of could have played week 1. And turns out that was very, very good advice. But it's like, you're just trying to, in our league that we did together, you'll notice, what did I draft? I drafted like Michael Pittman and Brandon Ayuk and a bunch of guys. You draft targets. These guys were falling down the board, and you're just trying to draft targets. But yeah, the biggest surprise for me, I think, is Mike Evans. I mean, I think when we looked at Tampa Bay, we said, okay, Baker's not going to throw it downfield. He's a dink and dunk. Maybe he's going to game manage his way to, Godwin getting 150 targets. We never really saw, Mike Evans maybe putting up a career high in yards and touchdowns under the command of Baker Mayfield. So that was a huge surprise. And anybody who held him, Mike Evans, that is, or bought him on the cheap for production reasons, really won this year.
Yeah, I mean, you were seeing Mike Evans getting traded for just a straight up random second last offseason.
Easy.
And people were trying to get rid of him, in single QB for like a late second. That's it. Wash my hands of him. And it's very interesting because, obviously there was some redraft element into it, and there was last year's production element into it, but the market was so different on the Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams tier of guys. And those guys were looked at as kind of like somewhat like evergreen fantasy values that never are going to get old. They're going to age well. And then Keenan Allen, I was able to trade for so cheap. And then Mike Evans was basically free. And I think it's those two guys were such a difference maker for dynasty managers this year. It just kind of goes to show us that, like, we think we know when, like, the guy's going to fall off a cliff, but we don't always time that correctly. I think that Mike Evans is a great example of it. And I think this offseason, I think people are going to be a little more open to those older wide receivers that seem like they're kind of diminishing in terms of their dynasty value, but they're giving us at least that short-term production. And Thielen, for that's what that matters. Thielen you get for literally nothing in the preseason. I mean, guys were willing to cut him. So
Yeah, in Dynasty Leagues, he was free. I mean, I think the thing that happens, Theo, and you know this, is like when you're in Dynasty, you don't want to be the one holding the bag. Like, I'm holding a couple of Dalvin Cooks right now, and it's like, I mean, you could almost drop Dalvin Cook, and he might not get picked up in a lot of Dynasty Leagues. I mean, he probably is on a lot of waiver wires in even deep Dynasty Leagues, I swear it. I looked at him in one spot, I was like CJ Beathard ad or something like that, and I was thinking Dalvin as a drop. Like, that's how bad it is. And think about just before the season, it was like, where's Dalvin going to go? Because he's going to annihilate someone. Remember? I mean, I said that. I know everybody said that. So that's what he was. He was like a fringe RB 2-3 flex sort of running back in Dynasty. And now, I mean, I don't know what someone could you get a fourth for him? Like, I mean,
No.
I'm not even maybe not probably, right?
The only manager in the league that would maybe give you a fourth for him is the Breece Hall manager if
Maybe.
they are chasing the money and want
Yeah.
to have that handcuff for the like the stretch run. And that would be the only
Yeah.
that would be the only rosters that I would want to have him on. And it's funny, we talk about like Leonard Fournette. Leonard
Yeah.
Fournette was like an RB1, and now he hasn't got on the field. These guys just fall off so quickly. And is Austin Eckler secretly kind of dust already? The guy looks like dust right now. And I had this conversation with Justin Boone yesterday, and I think people are still like, there's some really smart people out there that are still on the, don't worry, the schedule is getting better for Austin Eckler. The schedule is right around the corner. He's getting the target share, and the schedule's there. Don't worry, he's going to be okay for you in the fantasy playoffs. But I just don't see it. I see like a guy who looks like he's kind of lost the explosiveness, and we're very touchdown dependent. I would be scared to death having Austin Eckler in like my week 17 lineup, despite these positive matchups.
Yeah, totally. I had advocated Austin Eckler as a buy, I don't know, whatever, week 4, 5, 6, somewhere there, whatever, because, excuse me, because of that schedule, I was like, damn, that schedule is going to be sick. And, you always sort of just see, hey, he's going to be fine, the targets, all that stuff. But as the time has gone on and we watch him come back from that injury, he does not look right. Now, maybe it's an injury and maybe he's fine next year. Maybe it's one of these things that, you know how it is later on, after the season's over. Turned out Eckler was dealing with a, whatever the case might be, injury. But I don't know, man. It does not look good. And for Dynasty, he was sort of a scary proposition to begin with. I thought he might have some late career sort of satellite back usage on a solid team. Imagine if he went to the Chiefs and he was the DeAndre Swift type of back, or the Gibbs to Pacheco's Montgomery or something like that. That's the kind of thought process I was thinking about with Eckler. But if he's just not good anymore, if he has actually lost a step and he is, damaged to the point where he can't, repair himself, then he could be all done. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and let's stay with kind of the disappointments, because
I've got one.
Give me your biggest disappointment, and disappointments and guys that perform negatively based on our expectations in Dynasty. It can hurt like tenfold, because a lot of if I make a mistake in like a rookie draft and I'm stuck holding like a Michael Mayer over a Sam Laporta, or something like that, or even if I'm stuck holding a Kendre Miller over a Devon Achane, like you can come up with countless examples last year in startups and in rookie drafts. So who is your big disappointment?
Well, zero cares Michael Mayer. I was totally out, as you remember.
I do.
And I was into basically all the other tight ends. I didn't like Kincaid at value. I liked him as he was my tight end 1, but I didn't like him at value. But the other one, Kendre Miller, that kind of hurts a little bit, because I drafted Achane over Kendre Miller like in 5 or 6 straight drafts. Like I was like Achane, and then all of a sudden I started to get a little bit of cold feet, and I dabbled and I took a couple of Kendres over Achane. So I did do it a couple of times the wrong way. But the big one for me, the biggest disappointment, especially when you think about at cost, startup cost going into the year. How about Tony Pollard? Because Tony Pollard he's been awful. Like, he is lowest yards per carry. He's not even averaging as many yards per game this year as he did last year. And that was behind Zeke. So he's fewer yards, touchdowns are way down. He's averaging 5.9 yards per catch. Like, that is so atrocious. So he's been very, very bad. And the schedule, you're sort of looking down the stretch going, hey, he could be a league winner. And I think he might be, but boy, oh boy, so far it's going to be hard to have him in your lineup if you haven't made the playoffs because of his dumbass. It's been bad. It's
been really, really bad. And Pollard, his dynasty value just is nuked. And I fully expect Dallas to move on this offseason. And I think we'll see a brand new running back in Dallas. 100%. Start talking about some names kind of out there of the veterans. I mean, you could see King Henry in Dallas. You could see so many guys on this open market just might end up in Dallas and see their dynasty stock rise a little bit based on it. We're going to dive into a number of players here. We're going to hear about Scott's Anatomy of series, which is really, really important for dynasty managers to listen to. And we're going to dive into a number of topics that are going to help you in these fantasy playoffs. in just a moment.
This episode brought to you by Mojo. Mojo is that player stock market. We love Mojo because we like making lifetime bets on players. You run out the clock on these guys. Mojo just rolled out a brand new fantasy platform. That's right. So now you can build a portfolio of player props. Oh, Jamar Chase, over 77.5. Oh, Kadarius Toney, under 15.5. Whatever the under is on Kadarius Toney, doesn't matter. You can just stack up the props in your portfolio. And the beauty is, once the Sunday games kick off, it's not over. It's not over until it's over with Mojo, because once those games kick off, you can then move in and out of positions. Let's say that you're well ahead of expectations. You can cash out. Let's say you're behind expectations. You're underwater. Well, you can double down. That's what makes Mojo so special, why they're different. Check it out. Go to the App Store, get the Mojo app, and use the promo code Underworld. The promo code Underworld gets you a 100% deposit match up to $100. So the promo code is Underworld, and they will match your deposit dollar for dollar. Go to Mojo, start building your portfolio, and then during the games, you can be a fantasy day trader. Woo.
Welcome back to Dynasty Life. I'm Theo Gremminger, and I'm joined by Scott Bollinger, aka Jax Falcone, of the Undrafted. And we got to start the running back position here, because we touched on it a little bit in the early part of the show, but we got to get to the nitty gritty here, because this rookie class is so valuable when it comes to dynasty rankings, especially looking at the running back position. Tight end, obviously there's been some massive hits, but running back is just so scarce in dynasty. There's such big impactful performances that we've seen from Jahmyr Gibbs, and Bijan Robinson has done enough to kind of, let you see hey, this is why the hype was there. Despite Arthur Smith kind of frustrating us, the talent is definitely there. Where are you at? Are those two guys the top two running backs in dynasty right now? Can we move on, or do you want to talk about another guy in your top two?
Yeah. So this was I'm glad you brought this up. I wasn't sure if we were going to get here, because last week I listened to you and Scott Connor talk about the running backs, and it was interesting. You guys were like, oh, Bijan and Gibbs, RB1 for sure. And then kind of kept going and talked about CMC, like RB7 or 8 or something like that. And then you started talking and you said, you really got to look at these running backs as 1 year. What can they do? And I started thinking to myself, who's going to be a top 5 pick next year in redraft?
He's going to be the 101 if we're talking about CMC.
Right? So what the hell? Why are we? I mean, CMC has to be a top 2 or 3 running back in Dynasty, just because what more do you want than the 1.01 next year in redraft? I don't know what else you want. And so I'm holding CMC on one losing team. And it's actually it's a high variance league, 10-team league. And so everybody's kind of good. It's really sick. So my team's dope, but I'm going to be losing. And I was like, anybody want CMC to win it all? I put him on the block. Nothing worth anything. Everybody was trying to steal him. And they're like, getting old. I'm like, so I think the market is off on CMC. Win your fucking league. Pardon my French, but what is wrong with buying CMC? You're guaranteed, well, pardon me, knock on all the wood. You're albeit guaranteed outside of injury of him being perhaps the league winner down the stretch. He's already been the league winner thus far. And again, unless he gets hurt, he's the 101, 102, 103 in redraft next year. You have the queen chess piece going into next season. I think go buy CMC. I mean, what else do you want them to win your league? And no one knows who's going to be a good running back in 2025.
It's a very interesting way of looking at things, because from the production, 1,000,000% I would bet on Christian McCaffrey next year to continue breaking the mold. We have not seen a running back this late in their career put up this sort of numbers since Jamal Charles. So you're going back 20 years. He's a unicorn. And he's just fantastic. But I think at the end of the day, it's sort of that we're scared of the age cliff.
Sure.
And when we're doing dynasty startups, it's really hard for me to push that button on a 28-and-a-half-year-old running back.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the difference between the Bijan and the Jahmyr Gibbs. But
Sure.
I think it's sort of a like a semantics thing, because I think that the clear, like, CMC definitely gets in that running back 3 through 5, I think, for most people at this point. I mean, how could you? I think he's insulated at like RB5. Even if you're an ageist, you have to say, you know, that's kind of what makes sense based on the obscene production you get. And also you have the fact that this offseason we don't have quarterback concerns in San Francisco. There's no like, hey, is Sam Bradford or Trey Lance or Brock Purdy the quarterback? It's, hey, this guy who is competing for an MVP, he's going to be the quarterback next to Christian McCaffrey. So McCaffrey, I think, is going to be the 101 in redraft. But I think that the question that I really come down to is, let's say those are your top 3. We get down to it, like, the Breece Hall stands are strong in the streets. And I think that, like, I'm a guy who has a lot of Breece Hall in Dynasty, but I think I'm at Devon Achane over Breece Hall at this point, if I could have it on my Dynasty roster. And I think that's a little bit polarizing. So Devon Achane has given us, you know, these 4 top 5 overall weeks in his career, which is pretty much every week he's played. Breece Hall's done that in 19 games, giving us 5. You weigh the prototypical, you know, size Breece Hall versus the kind of the outlier in Devon Achane. Like, I think that's a little bit polarizing. Which way are you going when it comes to those 2 guys? Because I think that trade was out there a couple weeks ago. I know I did it. I pivoted from.
I heard that was sick. Yeah. Don't even bring that one back up.
You know how I roll with my trades.
I mean,
I'm not.
On, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about a bad trade on a podcast. Come on.
We're gonna have you on the show. Bad Trade Central. Just, you know, it's like a therapy meeting. You're like, and then what I did was I traded. You know, yeah. But yeah, no, I look. I'm with you. This Devon Achane versus Breece Hall thing, right? So. I don't know, was it 2 weeks ago? We talked about that question, and I had Achane as like RB7 or something behind, you know, that group. And I said, if we see him come back and he's healthy for the stretch run, this all changes. Because, see, here's the other thing too. We're talking today. Today is December 6th. We still have the fantasy football playoffs to hold. So if guys are listening to this thinking next year, well, then it's a whole different answer. Okay. A whole different answer. If you ask me, what's the dynasty rankings going to look like right before the NFL draft? Okay. Well, then I have to change that answer, but we're talking about right effing now. That's where CMC is right now. If next year going in, you're like, okay, I know he's the 101 in redraft, but how much is that worth compared to Achane? Maybe I'd rather have Achane. But I'm talking about right effing now. And right now, yeah, I would rather have Achane over Breece. That might change in the offseason where then we reset it. The Jets come out and they actually get a viable NFL quarterback, let's say a Gardner Minshew type. Thank you. See what I did there? But, you know, get an actual, maybe a Mike White could come in there. I don't know how they get their hands on a guy like that. But if they could get their hands on a guy like Mike White. Anyway, again, just needling all the Jets fans. But then it all changes for Breece Hall again, because we've seen him be just as explosive. And yes, you're right. He's younger. He's got that, you know, that workhorse size, all that stuff. But I think you're right. I think Achane right now, you know, I've got him on a couple of leagues, man, where he could be the actual league winner for me in several spots. And so his upside is tantalizing. I wouldn't let him go on those teams for almost any other player outside. Probably, honestly, only CMC. I mean, it is like he's just such an upside play for the rest of the season in the playoffs to win you money.
That's a really interesting take on the complete trade value. Like, you know, we talk about a guy like Breece Hall or Jahmyr Gibbs who are kind of like untradeable, really, for many dynasty managers. Like, there's no possible way. But if you had a Bijan Robinson share, which is a guy that I've said could be a league winner in like a different way, is there a pivot trade where you're trading like a Bijan for an Achane plus? Like, how much would that plus have to be? I mean, to get him off your hands.
As much as I could make it, right? You know, I mean, you know, as much as I can make it, but I definitely would 100,000% consider it. Because again, next year, going into the year, what are we going to look at in a redraft setting? Is Bijan going to be that far ahead of Achane if everything kind of like, you know, just lands how we think it's going to be? right? I mean, I think, we would assume they'd both be round one, maybe round 1-2 turn guys. I mean,
Yeah.
Achane's going to be right there in the second round. I mean, maybe even right. What do you think?
I like when we're talking about, I think Achane's going to be a redraft first round pick next year. So like at his age, I think he's going to end up like Dynasty
So what's the
startup
problem?
managers. Yeah.
Right.
I agree with you.
Of course.
Yeah. It's sort of like it's like that value trap in your head where you're unwilling to let go of something because you've wanted it for so long. And I think that's Bijan Robinson. But at the end of the day, fantasy points matter. And Achane's incredible. Let's pivot down though. We want to kind of close out this like insulated running back tier right now with Travis Etienne and Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
Like, do either of those guys belong in that top 5 discussion? Are they kind of in their own little mini tier? They're both going to be 25. Travis Etienne's taking a big step forward this year. Jonathan Taylor has the contract, unfortunate thumb injury, but I think that the Zach Moss success is like a real, like a plus for Jonathan Taylor heading into next season. Like the Shane Steichen offense works for running backs. It's getting him receptions, and Anthony Richardson healthy. We love the potential touchdown results. How those two guys, where are you at on them? Should they be considered in that top 5?
Yeah, to me, it's a 7-man tier. The Bijan, CMC, Taylor, Gibbs, Hall, Achane, Etienne, and that's where it ends, because those are the guys that, I mean, and actually, those are the 7 guys that have, sort of locked in utility next year. I know there will be other players with great utility next year, but we're not sure about it. There will be other players, obviously. What is that going to be? Josh Jacobs? Like, is Josh Jacobs going to be, lined up and ready to go? Obviously, Barkley will be potentially, right? We're just a little bit unsure. And then the other thing that those 7 guys share is youth. And then the last thing is, if we're talking about right now, production down the stretch, if you were ranking those down the stretch, Breece would be last, I think.
Yeah.
So that's why, for me, Breece, he'll probably go back up, but I've got him at RB5 in Dynasty right now, because if you're telling me I could get, and Taylor actually probably has to be moved down a little bit, probably RB4, but like if I could get, Achane or like you did, I mean, God, the Achane trade you made is just incredible, but CMC for Breece, and then I get some plus because Breece is somehow, I don't know. I mean, again, if I'm competing and I'm winning and I want the money, if you're in a big money league and you can get yourself CMC down the stretch, and I mean, I don't know, man. I just think that at this particular point, the running back that is going to be a game changer is the one that wins you the money. So that's it. I mean, these running backs are super fickle. And we trade them all off season. We prognosticate, and then we're wrong. Let's just face it. These were not the 7 guys we all had as the top 7 running backs coming into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when we start getting outside of that big 7, picking your favorite one is a very difficult proposition. Like,
totally.
There's a number of names out there that value could change dramatically. I think that's
in
a
one
really
week.
Good one.
Tony Pollard could go off this week, and he'd be like, people would be like, is he the RB5? So yeah, man. I mean, I just said Tony Pollard's a huge disappointment, but he could go off any of these guys. That's what I mean with running back is so fickle. But Achane, my gosh, I mean, come on, let's fucking go.
So pivoting over to the tight end position, and we have a question in the chat that kind of, really falls in line with this, because my question to you was, Trey McBride has had a rapid ascension. So the story, 2 months ago, we were talking about guys like Sam Laporta, then Dalton Kincaid had the rise. Now it's just Trey McBride. And you're talking about a guy who was a 2nd round draft pick. Yep. This is a guy who's producing at an elite level, leading his team in targets like we want to see from our elite tight ends. First of all, let's take this question in the chat. Kincaid or McBride rest of the season? Interesting one. As much as I hate to say it, I think I'm going to go McBride.
Yeah, McBride also in Dynasty. McBride easily. Yeah.
So that's interesting. McBride in Dynasty over Kincaid is a little spicy. Kincaid, again, it's semantics because you're talking about a late first versus 2nd rounder. Yeah. But he has the 1st round installation. We have an offense that we know is going to score a lot of points. I think Arizona, we hope, will take a big step forward next year. The McBride, you say that easily, McBride over Kincaid. Why don't you clarify?
Because also end of season, I just think McBride. I mean, if you extrapolate McBride's play right now, it's like 110 or 120 catches, 1,300 yards or something like that.
It's insane.
I mean,
it's insane.
He's going off. So I mean, I'm not saying that's going to continue, but I mean, he's clearly an alpha tight end. So I mean, when you were talking about what tier is he in, he's in the tier. He's in the tier with Laporta, Hawkinson, right? McBride. And that's kind of like the tier. And then when Andrews is healthy and Kelsey, of course, but that's the tier. And I think that's ahead of the Kincaid tier. I think McBride actually serves to potentially be a field tilting asset down the stretch, potentially, obviously. I mean, obviously it's to play like he's been playing, but yeah, I've really liked McBride coming out. I thought he was really good. I love, dude, this was one of my best calls too. I called McBride preseason. I did not think Zach Ertz was going to be Zach Ertz FML, because Zach Ertz had a torn ACL and came back like week 1 somehow at 30, whatever the fuck he is, years old. And that was a shock. So I thought McBride was going to get his run early. Never really did. Played behind Ertz. And I was like, oh man, a 2 full years of scuffling behind an aged Zach Ertz on a team that isn't going to make the playoffs. This is the dumbest malpractice I've ever seen in my life from an organization. They should have traded Ertz right away. They didn't. So then he got hurt. Now he's released. And they completely fumbled it. I thought they should have just said, Trey McBride, let's go. And I thought that's why he was going to be such a great redraft player. He ended up being that if you held on to him. But yeah, so I really thought McBride was great. I thought all of his underlying metrics were pointing up, and now you're seeing that come to fruition. They could certainly add some target competition as they have an early pick, and things could change for them. But at the end of the day, I think they're that McBride is arrow up, and he's definitely, McBride or Travis Kelce right now in Dynasty. I mean, you have to kind of lead McBride.
McBride, no question.
Yeah,
I like Kelsey in Dynasty. Yeah. I think he's got another year, but you're starting to see it where he just is starting to look a little bit older, and the production is still there. Him and Mahomes have the wonderful connection, but that's a clear one. McBride or TJ Hawkinson in Dynasty.
That's very close. And I probably lean McBride, but I'm okay either way. I had Travis Kelce as our tight end one. My tight end one I was claiming for as long as he's an extra tight end above all the rest of the tight ends. You know what I mean? Like if he's just amongst, and maybe even still the tight end one, but just amongst other elite tight ends, then he has to fall down because of age. But if he's actually the queen chess piece where he's literally a league winner, and he's been that for like 2 or 3 years straight, I'm like, when that ends, then he comes off the tight end one in Dynasty pedestal. I understand that it's, it might end unceremoniously, but for as long as he is that, he has to be the tight end one, because again, winning is what you're trying to do. Granted, if you're rebuilding, which I did last year, I got off of Kelsey in a rebuild. But if you're not, I mean, why not just hang on to him and ride the profit? Now, yeah, you got to start looking at him behind, maybe even Kincaid, although I think I'd have him in the top 5 for sure. I currently am looking, and I've got him at tight end 3, Kelsey, that is. But yeah, he's got to have to move behind all these elite younger guys.
Yeah, and McBride is 24 years old, the same as Kincaid. It's really a strong time for Dynasty startup managers with the tight end position, because you go down the list and that you could find value after value. I think redraft managers are having it a little bit easier this year as well, with some of these guys kind of coming out and performing like they are. But yeah, I love the McBride take. Now we got to talk about this one, because
by the way, in Scott Fishbowl, I drafted Laporta and McBride.
I had a Kelsey Kincaid.
That team's eliminated, by the way. I got eliminated in round 1 because I replaced my kicker last second and took a 0 at kicker and missed it by like 4 points. That team had Achane, Puka, McBride. It was, dude.
I know you were running pure this year with that team. I saw you at the top right there. So you were crushing it for a while.
A 1 week just catastrophic ending, and it's over just like that. Yep.
Next year. So we talk about the tight end position, and like, as fantastic of values as we see a second-year player in McBride, a first-year player in Laporta, a first-year player in Kincaid, now you have Brock Bowers coming into the mix. And I think, like, I had this conversation with Alan Soslowski and Matt Kelly on the Sonic Truth podcast last week about, I think that the market for Brock Bowers is going to be insane. I think he's going to get the draft capital, and I haven't seen this sort of enthusiasm. Like, people started getting around on Pitts, but I feel like it was a late steam for Pitts when it came to Pitts on rookie drafts, where people were kind of at him behind, like, even in tight end premium, you're seeing him like behind the Chases, behind the Najees, and then he had like that steam where people like started making that last minute move. The draft capital certainly helped, but when it comes to Bowers, we've been watching him do it in the national championship games, and he's been doing it as a true freshman. He's got the speed. He's sort of this like hybrid type, almost like wide receiver playing tight end, and they're using him on like design runs. It's ridiculous. Where do you think he's going to end up falling in line? Not in your personal ranks, but in dynasty startups.
Yeah, I've heard you make this case on a couple of occasions, namely, I think Sonic Truth, when I heard you say it. And I agree that he is going to get immense steam. I don't know that it's more than Pitts. I mean, Pitts was as steamy as I've heard, because I heard people say Pitts 101 in all formats on Twitter. This was like a thing. I mean, obviously, I know people run to the extremes with the flag plant so they can look cool when it happens, so they can have the receipt. I mean, literally, I know people do this, but there was a lot of it. There was a lot of people and those who probably weren't even trying to do what I just mentioned. They were actually believing that you should take Kyle Pitts, and just as the 101, he's that transcendent a player, the best prospect ever. I once said this about Kyle Pitts: he is the greatest tight end prospect that there ever was, and it doesn't matter. And I'll probably say the same thing about Brock Bowers. It's not to say that I don't think he's as elite a tight end prospect as there ever will be. He probably is, but how much does that matter? I don't know. We haven't been good at picking the best tight end out of a class almost ever. Kelsey wasn't number one in his class. Kittle wasn't number one in his class. Laporta wasn't number one in his class. Go on and on and on. It doesn't happen that way. So for all those reasons, you think you got the guy and you generally don't. I'm not saying Brock Bowers won't be the guy. I will be keen to see his landing spot in the real NFL. I heard you say that if he gets the nuts, it's possible he could land someplace where it's like, boy, I really have a hard time seeing him not be utilized correctly in offense X. But I do think he's going to get top 10 NFL draft capital. And I think as of right now, I think if you were to draft this moment, he'd be either the third or the fourth pick in the Dynasty Superflex non-tight end premium format.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting take. Like, and I think that when it comes to non-Superflex tight end premium, I think he probably ends up the 102 behind Marvin Harrison Jr.
And there'll be people who take him 101. He'll take some 101s. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not there. I'm a Bowers guy, but I'm
of course not.
Marvin Harrison.
Now you ask my personal opinion, I'll have zero at that. Malik Neighbors I'll definitely be taking Malik Neighbors over Brock Bowers. I mean, unless things get really wonky. But yeah, I mean, as of right now, I mean, look, if it gets really ugly, then maybe Brock Bowers will be the default pick. But I'll generally do what I did with the Kincaid pick. Every single time this is why I have zero Kincaid, by the way, or maybe one or something, a couple, whatever. I have a couple Kincaid, maybe one or two, but I have late first round picks. I love it when Podfather says this too, obviously. But I did. I had a number of like 110s or whatever. I'm on the clock. Kincaid is definitely the guy. Like, he's the next, in the ADP. I know someone wants him here. I sold that pick numerous times. I sold the Kincaid pick because I felt like I could get a Laporta or a Musgrave or even a Mayer, although generally he was gone, but I could get a Jaden Reed or a Marvin Mims. I could fall back and get a player that I felt just about as good about, and then reap a future first, which is what I often got for that Kincaid pick. And I felt great. And obviously that was the right move. I will do that probably with the Brock Bowers 103, 104, 105, wherever I'm at. And it's not that I don't like Bowers. It's just that I wouldn't normally draft a tight end with that type of capital, especially in a regular non tight end premium for sure. But even a super tight end premium, then maybe the pick is worth that much more. So sell the fuck out of it, because we still don't even know how Brock Bowers will be utilized, aka Kyle Pitts and all these other tight ends that have failed us in the past.
Yeah, and the chat, shout out to JR in the chat mentioning the kid from Texas and Jatavian Sanders. Like, we're going to talk about Jatavian Sanders a lot in the offseason. I think that he's going to see his value sort of rise up. A guy that could be another first round tight end, another like freaky athletic, like big producer from Texas. Let's pivot back to this 2023 class because we talked about Puka Nacua. Is Puka Nacua right now your wide receiver 1 in this class? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
it's funny, isn't it?
We're on Puka Nacua. We're both there at the wide receiver 1 in this class. Now, Tank Dell was on this incredible ascent, but we have to factor in the injury a little bit here. The injury does matter because again, you're losing him for the rest of the season, and lower body injuries are a little scary. Like, I think he'll be fine. There's nobody saying this is some catastrophic damage, like long-term thing, but at the end of the day, we got to see it. Where are you at on your wide receiver 2 in this class? Everything being equal, if you could roster one more guy from this 2023 rookie wide receiver class that's not Puka Nacua, who would it be?
It might be Tank Dell, depending on the situation, because I think a lot of these rookies are kind of, not necessarily helping us win this year. And I think the rest of the rookies are not helping you win this year. I mean, I'm looking at a few. I like Jordan Addison a whole lot, but I'm looking at him saying, okay, in a number of leagues I have him in, I'm probably playing him, but he's borderline. He's not like, oh, yeah, set it and forget it, especially with Jefferson coming back. Maybe that helps quarterback issues. So the rest of this year, not so sure. Heading into next year, I think Tank Dell will rise right back up and be a very, very, popular pick. So it may be Tank Dell as number 2. Just before this week, I had Tank Dell as my number 1 of this class. He was ahead of Puka just because he was also providing this incredible, rhythm with CJ Stroud.
I'll interrupt you because I've cited your reference on a couple of podcasts, and I've given you credit for this one. You mentioned the word Tyreek Hill, with Tank Dell, and I think that really resonated with me because the sort of massive week-winning performances he was able to give you this season, like that matters. Like counting stats matter, but at the end of the day, when you get down to like wide receiver 15 to wide receiver 30, a lot of it starts to merge together as the season comes along. But if you're telling me that there's a guy that's giving me these multiple 25-point weeks and I'm getting wins with him, like I think that matters a ton when trying to evaluate them.
Yeah, it's part of the reason that I don't have Zay Flowers in that tier. I have Puka, Addison, JSN just because of pedigree, and Tank Dell. Zay Flowers just a skosh behind that for me, if I were redrafting the 2023 wide receivers.
So we've talked about the wide receivers. We've talked about the tight ends from this class. Quarterback-wise, we're clear about C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, solved equation. I think CJ is now top 4 dynasty quarterback. Easy. I mean, it's crazy. It's just he's there.
Is there an Anthony Richardson pivot for CJ Stroud this offseason? Coming off of injury, if I offer you Anthony Richardson plus for your CJ Stroud, are you willing to make that pivot, or are you just so over the top like I am with CJ Stroud that you're like, you know what, thanks, but I'm sticking with Stroud?
It's interesting. I like Anthony Richardson. I feel like he showed enough that the lights aren't too bright. He's not going to just fold. He's not just a complete albatross. Like, I think he showed just enough that, I believe in him. When I say long-term, I mean 3, 4, 5 years. In other words, I don't think he's going to be a complete bust out the gate. And then he offers league-winning upside. He was rushing for touchdowns. A lot of people will give you a huge injury discount because he's quote-unquote, wink, wink, injury-prone now. I don't think that he's injury-prone at all. I just don't. I think it's a fallacy. Remember when Keenan Allen was injury-prone? I mean, I don't even know what that means. I mean, either the guy's broken or he isn't. I don't think a 6'4", 255 pound, Adonis is fucking broken at 22 years old. So I'm going to bet that he's just fine. I would consider it for sure. And I would hate to let go of CJ Stroud in any situation. So you're going to have to really sweeten the pot to get CJ Stroud off my hands, especially now. But that's why you probably should, because everybody knows that you got to pay up to get them. So if you have them, why not, pivot to another elite quarterback? I mean, now's the time to sell on CJ Stroud if you're going to. I mean, the hotness can't get much hotter. But I do think he's for real though.
Heat check, CJ Stroud, Dynasty Startup. CJ Stroud or Justin Herbert?
Oh, Stroud.
CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud or Lamar Jackson? I'm at CJ Stroud.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, Lamar has always been a little up and down. He's only giving you that one season of, supernova, right? Every other year has either been a little hurt, a little up and down, top 12, top 9. But even now, I think he's like quarterback 9 or something like that. I'm not looking, but, he's not, giving you what you really want from him. And that's another reason why I'm a little down on Zay Flowers. But yeah, definitely give me CJ Stroud.
Okay, here's one. CJ Stroud or Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, no, Mahomes is quarterback 1. And I have him ahead. I heard the show with you and everybody. Yeah, for me, he's ahead of Hurts. He's ahead of, Josh Allen is awesome, man. He's so fucking good, like especially for fantasy. So you can make the case for Josh Allen. I'm just banking Mahomes for his career. I just know what I'm going to get. And CJ Stroud's approaching Mahomes, so he might sort of pass the other two, but it's going to take a moment for him to pass Mahomes, given what I've seen from Patrick.
So I when we first got the awesome conversation on quarterbacks, we could do it for an hour. But I want to start talking to you a little bit about your anatomy of series, because that's how we first connected. I saw this and I'm like, this is amazing. This
fun.
Totally resonates with me. And I reached out to you, and over the years we become friends. But it's great. And I think this is, as you get larger in the space, I feel like less people know you for this because they just know you for the undrafted. But I feel like when it comes down to it, this was such a contribution to Dynasty, what you did with the anatomy of. Why don't you talk a little bit about what this is, when it started, and then we're going to take a look at some of these guys coming up in this 2024 class.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was kind of fun because I'll never forget how I looked at it. It was like I had a lot of data guys on Twitter giving you the R squared of yards per route run and whether or not that correlates to draft.
The nerds.
And I was like, dude, this nerdy shit is kind of cool, but I guarantee you nobody likes it. You know what I mean? Nobody fucking likes it. I mean, there's like a very small portion of the people are like, oh, the R squared, I don't fuck. So I said, well, there's stuff there, but let's just make it regular. Like talk to people regular. I said, so let's take some of that stuff and just make it like fun and easy to see. And I just said, what is the identity of a top 12 dynasty wide receiver? Or what's the identity of a top 8 dynasty tight end? And each year I'll probably use keep trade cut this year. I've tried to use something somewhat agnostic to my opinion and just use the sort of the top, ranked dynasty players at a given position, and then just look at what traits they share and then put that into, some content that shows you what they all share. And it's crazy that they all hit these certain benchmarks, right? Whether it be, speed or size or college production, early college production, draft capital, things like that, yards per route run. We'll use some geeky stuff in there too, but just all sorts of different stuff that sort of they all share. And what's interesting is when you see a player that just doesn't hit any of that and the rest of the community's hyping them up, you're like, just be careful. It doesn't mean they can't hit because there's outliers on all of these, but you're playing with fire when you're looking at players outside that. Maybe it's not quite an elite player. And, as we go back, some of the misses we saw coming, we've identified a lot of misses as well as a lot of hits, so yeah, it's just fun to see. And I know what's cool about it is I'll put it out there and then other people will they'll say, oh, look at this particular player, whomever, and they'll say, look, check mark, X, check mark. And I'm like, that's pretty cool, So people have fun with it, and it's real easy for them to interact with the information, and so that's what it is. It's fun.
Yeah, and just kind of put it in perspective, like a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba this past offseason, like this is a guy that checked how many boxes for you? Ballpark.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I have
all of them.
I have it
pretty much all of them.
Pretty much, right? I mean, yeah, he was prototypical size. He was drafted early. He had early production. He also, I mean, JSN was missed that his junior season basically. I mean, it was the same thing with some of the Jamar Chase did that, and it was like, the COVID thing kind of effed things up, and we're enough we're farther enough behind that where I think it's going to be a little bit easier. Because one of the things I like to look at, especially for these college wide receivers, is early production. Like if a guy steps on campus and he's good, he's probably good. It goes back to, Matt Kelly famously calling Hakeem Butler, right? Because Hakeem Butler was a late producer. And it's like, well, wait, he was at Iowa State and didn't do shit for 4 years. And then he's a fucking redshirt 23-year-old senior and he has a pretty good season. Yeah, maybe not. Right. And then he falls in the draft and so forth and so on. But point of the matter is that, we can look at those things and say, hey, there's a little bit of a red flag here. People are getting excited. I can't even remember. What's the Xavier guy? Xavier something, not Worthy. The other Xavier. I can't think of his name. He's sort of hitting some of that because he's a late producer and everybody loves him. And he's having a super productive season. I literally, I'll just tell you, we're going to talk about some rookies real quick, but I generally don't get into my full rookie analysis until after the fantasy playoffs. Once the fantasy playoffs are done and I don't have to do lineups, I don't have to do waiver wires, I don't have to think about my teams at such a, aggressive level, then I can get into looking at these prospects, start looking at the information, the data, the numbers, maybe even get into some film. I usually do film in the spring or, after the new year, February-ish, because I don't need to do it now. So I won't do it now. And so that's what I'll do. So I'm not all the way there yet, but I can't remember that dude's name. Do you got it pulled up?
Colorado one, right? I like Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy is my guy, and Cody Carpenter's guy.
Xavier Leggett. Leggett.
Leggett from South Carolina. He's starting to blow up a little bit. But if you want to hear about Xavier Leggett, listen to Matty Kiwoom and Cody and I. On Futurecast, we did a 2024 mock, but I want to kind of
let me just give you this real quick. Xavier Leggett, 80 yards, 113 yards, 63 yards, and 167 yards. Those are his receiving totals from the last 4, not games, last 4 seasons. It's not good.
Yeah, he'll be an interesting one because there are people that are flag planting him, and there's some people that are just not into it right now. I do think he'll end up being a day 2 guy, but I really want to kind of talk to you about the top of the class here. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to break your anatomy of. This is the guy. This is the guy. How excited are you about Marvin Harrison Jr.? I think we're all excited, but let's say this. How many wide receivers are you going to have ahead of him in a dynasty startup to start next season?
Not many. I mean, he enters, I think, that elite tier. I mean, we were talking, Soslowski asked that great question. Remember, which player this year has the most likely chance of breaking into the top 2 tier? Hey, it's my boy. It's CeeDee Lamb. Was the right answer, right?
You're 100%. 100%.
It was CeeDee
Lamb.
And
a shout out to the CeeDee Lamb faders who have gotten into it with Jax over the years and myself. Come on, man, take your L.
Hey, whatever.
Take your L.
But hey, I CeeDee Lamb. So he's there. But the answer that you and I were giving was, cheat Marvin Harrison Jr., bro. And it's true. He is going to be breaking in there. I mean, so yeah, he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver easily, probably top 5 in dynasty redraft. So dynasty startups.
You have Marvin Harrison easy, wide receiver 1, and then Malik Neighbors is sort of coming into his own as like a de facto 1B for some people. I have him as wide receiver 2 in this class. Are you kind of on that same page?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't see how you can see it any other way at this point. Again, I have not watched film. I don't know. I mean, I've seen him play, I mean, looks fucking amazing to me, but yeah, I mean, just by the numbers and by the straight eye test at this particular point, again, I'm 30,000 foot view, not deep dive and not film. Yeah, it seems kind of clear to me. I can't wait to dive in and see if there's any story other than he's awesome. I don't see it coming.
I don't either. And I think that like the tape doesn't lie. You only need to watch him a little bit to say that this is
right.
a NFL, this is a Sunday player and we want him on our dynasty teams. Baller. Yes. Now, when we start getting to wide receiver 3, though, I think that becomes a discussion. And I think it might be a long-term discussion because after the Marvin Harrison Jr. and after Malik Neighbors, you have a number of names here. And there's going to be some people that want to talk about the Troy Franklins and the Emeka Egbukpa. But for me, there's 2 dudes who are kind of standing out. Keon Coleman and Rome Odunze. Is there one of those guys that from a 30,000 foot bird's eye view, you're more into right now?
Rome, he looks like the right kind of guy for me. Rome Odunze out of Washington feels like the wide receiver 3 for me at this particular point. So at this particular point, which again is sort of loosely held, no conviction to any of this, is Marvin Harrison, Neighbors, then Odunze for me. And to me, that's kind of like, it feels kind of strong. I think, Emeka or however the hell you say his name, and Troy Franklin would be next for me. I think I probably have Troy Franklin as my wide receiver 4. Again, at this particular point, it's Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, and Franklin. Keon Coleman, I'm not feeling it as much, but I will need to do a little bit more digging. I'm not saying he's not a good player. I'm getting a little bit of that, outside alpha, George Pickens type of player, but maybe not George Pickens level athlete, or George Pickens level player, and so how much utility does that guy have in fantasy? Maybe he's a good NFL player, but hey, maybe, Nico Collins, right? I mean, is he, I don't know. So we'll have to see exactly what I think of Keon Coleman. I think if he's good enough on the outside, he could be someone interesting. If he's just average on the outside as a prospect, I don't like outside prospects unless they're really elite.
So I think I'm a little more bullish on him than you are, and I do view him a little bit more like he's, to me, a better separator, a better route runner than like Pickens. I think Keon Coleman's interesting. He's also a younger prospect, so you're going to get him coming in the league young, but he's really, really fun. And I think that there's a kind of and I can't wait to talk about these guys with you this offseason and really, really dive into it. If we didn't have that whole pesky 1 month left of the NFL season, we could really, really get into it. But I think there's a big, at the top with the quarterback class, it's a pretty clear top 2. And then I think people are getting really excited about Daniels. And then a couple people have a couple other quarterbacks that they're kind of into. I think that the quarterbacks are going to gain a little bit of value. I think Daniels is a stud. And I think people are going to start really, really liking him as an NFL prospect, especially in Superflex. But there's sort of and then obviously tight end we touched on earlier in the show, where people are thrilled with Brock Bowers, and Jatavian Sanders, people are like, wow, I can get Jatavian Sanders as tight end too. I feel great about that. Yeah. The wide receiver class is looked at as a transformative wide receiver class. But then there's the running back position. And this past year we had Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson both go in the top 12 overall in the NFL draft. Both of these guys were entering Dynasty as elite Dynasty values at the running back position. There's a little bit of apprehension when it comes to this running back class, but we both had the initial lean on the running back that we're kind of into, and a guy that, when we talk about a guy potentially being able to touch on low-end RB1, he's kind of there for me, because he can catch the football, and that's Travion Henderson. Where are you at on him? What kind of gets you excited about him? And is you're currently your RB1 in this class?
Yes, for sure. I think we Travion had a tough 2022. Everything was down. He didn't play that many games. He didn't do as much. He didn't catch as many balls. He just didn't do anything. I'll be interested to hear the full story about that, because again, I don't follow college football too intently, but I do know that he was the RB1 in all of Devy after his freshman season at Ohio State. Had an absolutely huge freshman season. And you know what? He was pretty good this past year as well, especially on a per game basis. It basically replicated that freshman season. So I think he sort of showed himself back as that prospect. I don't know. I'm going to look to throw out 2022 and rely on 2021 and 2023 as sort of what he's capable of. He's kind of prototypical size. I think he's going to be 5'10", 210. That's exactly what you want. I mean, somewhere in there. I mean, I don't know. He doesn't look all that much bigger or smaller than that. But here's the thing. We've sort of learned that doesn't even matter so much anymore right now. The way that, backfields are sort of more of a split backfield anyway. And if you can catch passes, which he can do, and if you can break big plays, which he has done, then you can be pretty valuable. Where he gets drafted, I think you and I both agree he's a round 2 pick almost no matter what. So I think he's going to get drafted with good capital as long as he gets somewhat of a soft landing. I mean, you hate to see the Zach Charbonnet treatment with him, landing behind someone right? You know what I mean? But landing spot does matter for running backs way more than it matters for wide receivers. Wide receivers targets are earned. Running backs, you have to be handed the football. So, all that is, going to be factored in. But for me, he's the clear RB1 heading in.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think that's, you did hit the nail on the head, because I think that one of the takeaways from the season has been sort of these running back by committees where they still have incredible production, where you think there might be teams that might be more apt to say, hey, I want 2 really good running backs. The cheapest way for me to go about this is getting one of these guys in the draft, and I'm just going to split the baby, so to speak. Terrible for us, probably good for real life football. And I really don't want that. I don't want that at all. But Scott, you've been incredibly generous with your time, as you always are, and your takes. Why don't you let everybody know once again where they can find your work?
I'm just getting warmed up, man.
I know. We're trying to keep this tight. When we're on your pod, we're going to go forever. We're going to go forever.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait. It was like this last week I said on the pod too, it's coming. It's coming, guys. It's coming. We're going to have all the college guys, and that's what's going to be so much fun. It's weird. Like, I don't know, I don't know if you ever look at your podcast numbers. It's tough to do, but because you get married to it. But I did notice every single year, right around now, people start not paying attention. They're not doing Christmas, Thanksgiving, their team's out of contention, but the numbers shoot right up, especially for mine, in the spring when we're talking rookies. So for those who want to, deep dive all off season, that's what, my show, we do it all the time. It's going to be so much fun. We ask so many different, people, their opinions. And that's kind of the fun thing is, some shows are, just 2 guys every week, and it's the same fucking opinion every week. For me, I'm going to have, all sorts of different perspectives on all these prospects and try to figure out who's right, who's wrong, and which information is something we should be paying attention to. So you can find all that and more on the Undrafted podcast, theundroppables.com, at the Undroppables podcast feed, and on Twitter at Dino Game Theory.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Highly recommend your work. And if you're into these rookie mock drafts, I dropped one like a couple weeks ago with Cody Carpenter and Matty Kiwoom on Futurecast, and people loved it. So we're going to run it back this Wednesday night. We did Superflex. The first time. This time we're going to do a non-Superflex. We're going to go 3 rounds, real sicko stuff. That's going to be
low-hanging fruit mock draft content. I love it. It's so much fun to do.
It's amazing.
People love it too. They can't get enough of it. They'll watch it. I could do my show, just call it mock draft. Fucking, people would listen every week. It's so much fun. So the
Undroppables mock draft special. Tuning in weekly. But we'll be doing that next week, and check out press coverage I recorded yesterday with Justin Boone, and then First Class Fantasy tomorrow. I'm actually having a guy you don't know, a guy that's an unknown to the Player Profiler audience. I'm going to have actually the Podfather Matt Kelly joining me on First Class Fantasy. Billy Muzio can't make it, so I have a fill-in host, Matt Kelly, the Podfather. But this was awesome. We got to do it again. Stick with us at Dynasty Life all off-season long. I'm going to be bringing you some of the best minds in Dynasty, like our guy Scott Bollinger today. Guys, we got to crush it, finish out your seasons. This is the week to put a little extra time in the waiver wire, to take some extra time with your lineup decisions. If you're in a Dynasty league that's still trading, go out and make that trade. This is money time. It's going to be over in a month. Put that energy and time in this week. Have a great rest of your day, and take care.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.